War is hell. It reaches every hand, from the soldier in the trench to the nurse at his side, from the engineer forging weapons to the families left behind. These are their stories. This is World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches. Today's episode, a different kind of normal. Elena caught movement out of the corner of her eye. Beyond the refugee column, just inside a small stand of trees, stood a young deer. It was nearly hidden among the autumn leaves, its ears twitching as it watched the endless procession of wagons and weary families. She nudged her brother. "Luca, look!" He followed her gaze and smiled. "Is that a deer?" "A deer? Where?" Adrian asked, stretching onto his toes. Elena pointed toward the trees. "There." Adrian squinted. "I don't see anything." "It moved," Luca said. "Come on." Elena took Adrian's hand and gently led him away from the road. Luca followed close behind as they crossed the harvested field, its golden stubble crunching beneath their toes. Every few steps, Elena glanced back towards the refugee column until she found her parents again. Stefan was helping push a neighbor's overloaded wagon, while Anna walked beside it, clutching the family's few belongings. Satisfied they were still in sight, Elena turned back toward the trees. The deer hadn't gone far. It paused between two oaks, looked back at the children, its ears suddenly standing erect. A heartbeat later, it wheeled and vanished into the woods. A faint whistle drifted through the autumn air. Elena frowned. The sound grew louder. Then came a deafening roar. A wave of scorching air slammed into her, throwing her to the ground. For a moment, there was nothing but ringing in her ears. Then beneath the ringing, she heard roar after roar all around her as the ground shook. As she rolled onto her back and struggled to sit up, the world slowly returned. Crying, screaming, horses shrieking in terror. Refugees stumbling from the road, some clutching bleeding wounds while others ran blindly across the field toward the trees. "Adrian!" Elena shouted, her voice sounding strangely distant. "Luca!" "What was that?" Adrian cried. "I'm here," Luca answered from somewhere to her right. Relief washed over her as both boys emerged from the settling dust. She grabbed their hands and began to run in the same direction as the others, towards the safety of the trees. Then Luca stopped and turned toward the road. His eyes widened. "Look!" Elena also turned toward the road. Where the refugee column had been moments before, a smoking crater now scarred the earth. An overturned wagon burned beside it. A horse kicked wildly in its harness as men rushed to free it. Her heart dropped. "Where's Mama?" she whispered. "Where's Papa?" Without waiting for an answer, Adrian and Luca sprinted toward the road, weaving around frightened refugees who moved in the opposite direction. "Wait!" Elena shouted, chasing after them. The explosions had stopped, and smoke now drifted across the shattered road. The wagon their father Stefan had been helping push was gone. Their mother Anna's bundle of belongings lay scattered across the dirt. Then Elena saw them. She had barely had the time to process the fact that her parents were dead before she heard the rumbling. She glanced in the direction where they had walked from to see dust rising in the distance. After a moment, she realized that it was soldiers, men marching, men on horseback, and men riding in automobiles. She screamed at her brothers to run to the woods, and they did. Others had stopped in the field and watched the road, curious about what was going on. Elena had no such thoughts. She had been there when the Austria-Hungarian army had crossed the border into Romania and entered her village. She remembered why they had fled. Why were these people just standing here? Elena and her brothers were not going to wait to see what happened. Not this time. As they made their way deeper into the woods, they heard gunshots and screaming erupt behind them. She was unaware of exactly how far they had ran before stopping. That had been 2 hours ago. The midday sun was just above them when she realized they had no blankets, no coats, and no matches. It will be cold tonight, she thought. I think we need to go back towards the road, she told her brothers. Why? Asked Luca. She looked at both of them, a concerned look on her face. Because we have nothing. Our best chance is to see if there's anything left in the wagons, see if there are coats, blankets, anything. Luca nodded his head. Then let's go, before it gets dark. Will the bad men still be at the road? Adrian asked. Taking a deep breath, Luca answered. I don't know, but I have a plan when we get close to the road. It had taken them 2 more hours before they could see the outline of the road through the trees. Elena stood, her head cocked upwards, watching Luca climb a large oak tree. His idea was to climb high up and see if he could see any movement on the road. Any soldiers, anything at all. 15 minutes later, he was back on the ground. It was hard to see, the sun was in my way, but I didn't see anybody moving around. I think it might be safe. Elena had thought about what she would do should this be the case. I'm going alone. You two stay here. If you hear me whistle, then it's truly safe and you can come. Adrian began to cry. I don't want you to go. What if Luca just couldn't see the bad men? She got down on one knee before her little brother. He looked so fragile to her in that moment. She touched his face. Luca saw no one. I'm just going by myself to make sure. If I see anyone, I'll come back. She took him in her arms. But if we don't get blankets or even coats, then we will die out here. He stuttered as he said, okay, and bowed his head. Luca said nothing at all. It was almost as if he knew not to plead. She was always hard-headed. Twigs and fallen leaves made crunching noises beneath her feet. They sounded louder than they actually were. The western sky was orange as she neared the clearing, hid behind a tree, and began to peek her head out to look in all directions. Luca was right. The road was now empty. She could see that the wagons that had been on the road when the shells dropped were now tipped over in the field, their contents strewn all over the ground. After a few moments, she stepped out into the clearing. She took a look around and then darted back behind the tree. She let loose a whistle, probably the loudest she ever had, she thought to herself, and waited. She did not want Adrian to see the field without her. It would be hard enough for Luca, let alone a 9-year-old. When they joined her, she once again knelt in front of Adrian. I need you to take my hand and close your eyes when we walk. Don't open them until I tell you. Do you understand? Confused, Adrian nodded his head in agreement. Is it bad? Luca asked. She shot him a look but said nothing. She took Adrian's hand and they began to walk. She glanced back more than once to make sure Adrian kept his eyes closed. Luca gasped in horror as they entered the clearing. She looked back to see Adrian with his eyes open. They were darting all around the field, taking it all in. To her surprise, he was calm. There were no tears. He didn't seem scared at all. She stopped and stood, taking it all in herself. Before them lay the bodies of those that had been with them just hours before in the caravan. Their bodies riddled with bullets, and some even smashed with the butts of rifles. One lady held tight to a baby that no longer had a head. She looked at Luca. We need to search the carts. We need blankets, matches, and food. I'll keep Adrian with me. What if we can't find blankets? Luca asked. Some of these people are wearing coats. She paused, not believing what she was about to say. We will have to take them. Where will we sleep? Adrian asked. I'm tired. She looked down at her little brother. We will run back into the woods. We won't make it too far tonight. It'll get too dark, so we won't be able to have a fire. So let's get enough just to stay warm. We can come back in the morning if we have to. She never thought that at the age of 13, she would have to act as a mother to her 12 and 9-year-old brothers. What then? Luca asked. Then we go where Mom and Dad said we were going, to Bucharest. to Grandpa. They had found blankets, and to Elena's surprise, they had also found matches and food. The first night had been bitterly cold. She felt they had been too close to the road and the clearing to start a fire. The next morning, they had found a wagon that was not damaged. It was one she and Luca could pull if they worked together. They had loaded it with Adrian and the supplies they had found, then planned to follow the road they had been following before the shells had hit. The army was going this way, Luca mentioned. She knew their village sat near the border between Romania and Austria-Hungary. Going back was not an option. You're right, but we cannot go back the way we came. We'll end up in Austria in a few days. So what do? We follow the road. If we see the army, then we get off the road as quick as we can. Luca had agreed, and they started off, but first they had to navigate their way around the crater, the resting place of their parents. Adrian refused to look, but she and Luca took a moment to remember them, to mourn, although she knew they had little time for that. Soon they were making their way north along the road, and then east as the road veered in that direction. They were on their way to Bucharest, to their grandfather. Soon they came to a fork in the road. They could see the wagon, horse, and men tracks veer off the road that they were on and take a left turn. Luca noticed first. Good, they got off this road. We should be okay now. Elena was not so sure. Yes, if they went that way, then they are going to Bucharest. Still, look for soldiers. They walked during the day while pulling the wagon, which got lighter day by day as they used the supplies. Adrian began to walk more with them as well, instead of in the cart. At night, they always hid the cart within the trees, gathered wood, and lit a fire. Some nights they had food. Some nights they did not. It all depended on if Luca could catch a squirrel or a rabbit. They had no knife, so Luca used a sharp stone as best he could. He never did it cleanly, and the smell of burned fur clung to everything. 3 days later, they had burned the wagon and reduced themselves to carrying the blankets they used at night as they walked. Even Adrian had stopped complaining. On a few occasions, they had snuck into and slept in barns along the road, sometimes meeting other refugees that had been resting. And with every village and farm they passed, and with every traveler they encountered, they asked the way to Bucharest, and were always pointed in the direction they were already traveling. It took 2 weeks for the children to reach the capital. It was mid-morning when they first stepped foot into Bucharest, a place that might as well have been a world away from the small border village they had fled just a few weeks ago. Here, life seemed to go on as usual. They were starving. Berries and small animals had become harder to come by over the last few days. After an hour of wandering the city streets, they found themselves in a square surrounded by 2- and 3-story buildings. The cobblestone square was filled with various carts and vendors. She saw people selling blankets, various foods, and even some jewelry. People crowded the square. Wagons moved along the roads as women and men scurried in and out of the shops and stood at various vendor carts that dotted the square. Elena had never seen so many people in one place before. The smell of freshly baked bread and roasted meats hit her nostrils. She took a long, satisfying whiff. That was a mistake, she said to herself. Now I'm even hungrier. How do we find Grandfather? Luca asked her. Mama said he lived by a church. I can't remember the name of it, though. She looked around then and saw 3 churches from where she stood. Luca must have done the same. But which one? He asked. In the distance, she saw a bread vendor and a small boy approaching it. He was dirty, with unkempt hair. He looked familiar. She looked down to her right side where Adrian stood. He was gone. She looked towards the bread vendor again and realized that the little boy approaching the cart was her little brother. Adrian! She yelled across the square, and with Luca right behind her, she began to sprint toward the bread cart and her little brother, dodging people, but not taking her eyes off of him as she went. Elena looked on in horror as he ducked under the table, then with one hand reached up and felt for and grabbed a long loaf of bread and pulled it to him under the table. She and Luca reached the table, both panting from the brief exertion. She stood inches now from where her brother hid under the table. The lady behind the cart, who had been stacking more loaves onto her cart, looked up at her and Luca. "My, you're a dirty one, aren't you?" said the woman behind the cart. Elena went to speak, but Luca was quicker in the endeavor. "We've come from far away. A village called Vuka. You ever heard of it? Our parents were killed when the Germans came." Elena's found her voice and corrected her brother. "It was the Austrians, Luca." "Right, Austrians," he continued. "We traveled alone and very far. We're looking for our grandfather." The woman stood with her hands on her hips as she listened to Luca, who continued to tell their entire story, leaving no detail out, and sometimes embellishing his own bravery and cleverness. Elena did not interrupt. Let him have this, she thought. By the time he had finished telling their tale, 3 other adults had joined in to listen. "What's your grandfather's name?" one asked. Elena looked up at the man. "Nicolae Ionescu." "Don't know him," the man replied. "I do," the woman behind the cart answered. "You do?" Elena asked excitedly. "I'll tell you what. You help me today, and when all this bread is sold, I'll take you to him." Having forgotten all about Adrian hiding under the table, Elena and Luca agreed immediately. The woman continued with a large smile. "I'll even forget about the loaf of bread your brother has under the table." They had shared the loaf of bread with Adrian. That is, after they had been able to coax him out from under the table. He had been afraid that he would be in trouble. Then, for the rest of the afternoon, Luca had run around the square telling their story to anyone who would listen, while at the same time leading them towards the bread cart belonging to the woman they now knew as Ingrid. Ingrid had taught Elena how to take the money and give the customers what they wanted. Then she had taken Adrian by the hand to a fountain to clean his dirty face. "Cannot have your grandfather seeing you this dirty," she had said. When Adrian was clean, she had sent Elena to do the same, and then eventually Luca. Now, all 3 children had clean faces, necks, and arms, their clothes now a direct contrast to all that cleanliness. As the sun began to set, the bread had all been sold. They watched as Ingrid rolled her cart to a nearby shop, where she rolled the cart through the door for storage. Elena could smell the bread even stronger here. Then she saw that the far wall had been equipped with ovens and tables. This was obviously where Ingrid baked the bread she sold. She led the children back out, closed and locked the door behind her, and began to lead them through the now empty square. "Let's go find your grandfather." He opened the door with a cautious look on his face that upturned to a smile when he saw her. "Ingrid, it's so nice to see you. What brings you by?" Elena, Luca, and Adrian stood just behind Ingrid, but he had not noticed at all. Smiling, Ingrid looked up at him. "I believe I found something that belongs to you." He smiled even larger now. "Is it my heart?" he asked. "Because you stole that years ago. Did you wish to come in?" Elena could see Ingrid shift as her face turned beet red. She giggled. "We can talk about that later, Nikolai." Then she moved to reveal the children behind her. His face changed in an instant. The playful, adoring smile had morphed into one of surprise, then just as quickly one of loving concern. "Elena! Luca! Adrian!" Before she knew it, he had rushed to them and taken them in his arms. She felt the tears fall from his cheek and onto hers. The hug, feeling so tight, so comfortable, she never wanted it to end. The story of the 3 orphan children had spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, and many attended the memorial their grandfather had organized for his only daughter and her husband. Donations of clothing and sometimes food had come from many people in the area. Life was beginning to look normal again, although it was a different kind of normal. Many nights passed when Elena could hear Adrian crying for their parents, and now that she did not have to remain strong for her brothers, she found herself able to let go and cry too. This morning, they sat around the small table in Grandfather's kitchen. A bowl of warm mamaliga sat before each of them, topped with crumbled cheese. Nikolai had also poured them each a cup of warm milk. Although the routine was new to Elena, she liked it. Their old home in their village had been small and had no kitchen table to sit at. They had often sat on the floor to eat. The neighborhood itself had other children to play with also, something the village lacked. Over the last 2 weeks, Ingrid had stopped by often to check on them, but Elena strongly suspected that she was there more for Grandfather than them, because she was often still there when he put them to bed, and sometimes even there to help with breakfast. Ingrid had also recently suggested that she wake Elena in the early morning to teach her to bake the bread she sold on the cart. I would love that. But Grandfather had intervened. She needs school, not baking, he had said at the time. She watched him this morning as he put his spoon down, lifted his cup, and took a drink of his milk, all the while peering at the children over his glass. You children begin school in 2 days. Are you ready? Yes, Grandfather, replied Adrian. Luca joined in the assent. Grandfather turned his focus to her. What about you, Elena? Are you ready for school? I think so, but I would rather bake the bread. He reached across the table and took her hand. He was so loving, she thought. In due time, you will get that chance. But for now, you need to be a child. You need to play with other children. You need to learn with them. You need to grow with them. You have plenty of time to be an adult in this life. Trust me. A distant rumbling reached them from the street. Grandfather's attention shifted quickly, almost violently towards the front of the house, the front door, the windows. He stood slowly. What's wrong, Grandfather? Elena asked. He calmed quickly and turned to her. Probably nothing. She watched Luca and Adrian jump from their chairs and dart towards the window in the parlor that overlooked the street outside. Luca pulled back the curtain and looked out. Adrian, who had stood next to him, jumped backwards, and she could see the wetness appear from the bottom of his pant leg. She watched her grandfather open the front door and found herself walking slowly to join him. Together, they watched as the invading army walked through the streets of Bucharest. You've been listening to World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches, where history comes alive through the lives of those who lived it. If this episode moved you, please share it, follow, and leave a rating. Help keep these stories alive. Want to hold these stories in your hand? Explore the books inspired by them, available now on Kindle and in paperback.